So yeah, there was an assignment of murder against me from day one. What I found is when the devil launches an assignment against your life, because he knows you have a call in your life, and we all do, he's going to do everything he can to try to take you out or crush you so it doesn't come to pass. One of my earliest nightmares as a small child was crawling on all fours, try to put my fingers under a wooden door to touch my sister's fingers when she'd be locked behind that door crying. Welcome. I'm Eileen Floyd, and I'm here because you matter. We're going to go down a different path today. I think it's important that we know who we're listening to, that we know who's sitting next to us. So just pretend I'm sitting in the living room with you, and we're having a little chat to explain why I ended up becoming an ordained minister and ultimately a life coach. We all have a story. Each of you has a story. I want to begin to share my own personal story. I'm opening up the closet. I want to let all the skeletons come out for all the world to see, or certainly for all of you. You may recognize some of those skeletons. They might be in your closet too. So let's start at the beginning. I was born in 1950. That was a time in life when having an illegitimate child was an absolute disgrace. Didn't happen. Was not socially acceptable. When my mother gave birth to me, it was during a time when you had to stay in the hospital for 10 days after giving birth. Nowadays, they're rolling us out in 24 hours, but in those days, it was a 10-day recovery. And I got this from firsthand witnesses. When I was born, immediately the doctor and the nurses presented me to my mother and asked if she would like to see me and hold me. And her answer was, "Take it away." Each day, they kept bringing me into my mother, all swaddled up. "Would you like to feed her? Get it out of here." She wanted nothing to do with me. On the 10th day of the hospital stay, the nurses approached her, and this was witnessed. They said, "You must give us a name for the little girl because we can't discharge you until you do. I have to have a name for her birth certificate." So my mother, pretty angry about it, she spit out a name that rhymed with my older sister, whose name was Kathleen. Eileen. That's how I got my name, in a moment of absolute disgust and disdain and rejection. I was immediately put into foster care. During the time I was in foster care, my first 6 weeks, I was in a farmhouse in upstate New York, and my maternal grandmother came to visit. No one knew it, but she came with every intention of murdering me. And in the midst of her visit, she made a bolt for the bassinet. And there were fortunately some very strong farmer men present, and they had to physically hold her back while she literally foamed at the mouth with rage and said, "I have to kill it. I'm going to slam her head and get those brains on the wall because she's ruined my daughter's life." So yeah, there was an assignment of murder against me from day one. After that little incident, I think the state got involved because the police got involved. And my older sister and I were placed in foster care, and we were wards of the state. So, any of you who've ever been in foster care, I can relate. Any of you who've been rejected and unwanted by one or both parents, I've been there. So, the path of rejection and damage continued. What I found is when the devil launches an assignment against your life, because he knows you have a call on your life, and we all do, he's going to do everything he can to try to take you out or crush you so it doesn't come to pass. So his next step in the plot to destroy Eileen was for my mother to remarry. She regained custody of us, and my sister and I went to live with them. During that time period, she became ill and was hospitalized about 10 days. And it was during that absence of my mother that the new stepfather turned out to be a child predator. My sister and I were alternately locked in closets and then brought out for play. And if you cried or screamed or objected, you went back in the closet and got locked up. One of my earliest nightmares as a small child was crawling on all fours, try to put my fingers under a wooden door to touch my sister's fingers when she'd be locked behind that door crying. And it meant a lot for me to at least touch her fingers. Let's shorten this. Then when I was 6, by the way, that incident put us back in foster care. But after another 2.5-year stint in foster care, we were brought to live with my mother again. And she was a single working secretary in a law firm in Washington, D.C. Very respected, well-dressed, attractive, well-spoken. And the interesting thing is, narcissist with some borderline personality disorder. Now, I didn't get that diagnosis from someone, a therapist sitting down with her. But after having consulted and worked with and done work with 3 psychotherapists in my lifetime for extended periods of time, it was the majority and unanimous opinion that my mother was a narcissist who probably had a pretty strong overlap of borderline personality disorder. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with that, but I doubt that you are, most of us know at least 1 or 2. These are people who are incapable of empathy. They are incapable of love. It really is all about them. They are blind to the emotions and the needs and the pain of others. They are so afraid of being exposed and people finding out about their dark side that if you have to be totally loyal to them, obedient, never tell, because we have to protect the image at all costs, even your own health, well-being, or sanity. So that's the atmosphere in which my sister and I were raised. By the way, if you're the child of a narcissist, physical injuries and sicknesses are not tolerated. They're certainly not going to be babied. So when I was 7 years old, I remember being given a new lunchbox. Now, this is the 50s. We had lunchboxes. And when you opened them up, they'd have this glass-lined thermos that would keep your milk from congealing between when you went to school and lunchtime. Well, I had this brand new lunchbox. I also lived by very strict rules because a narcissist is a controlling person. So there's rules for everything. And one rule was you walked home from school on the sidewalk. You never got off that sidewalk. You don't get on the grass. You don't go under the trees. You stay on the sidewalk. So, 2nd grader, skipping home from school, feeling really happy with my little book and my little lunchbox. And I decided to just run a little bit through the grass that was right next to that sidewalk. That's what kids do. I hit a pipe that I didn't see, and I tripped, and I went flying. And the only thing that flashed through my head was not catch yourself or save yourself. It was, don't let that lunchbox get broken, or boy, are you going to be punished. And punishments, which we'll get to, were pretty severe. So I held my arm at a weird angle, broke my arm. When I got home, I was in a lot of pain. We had a wonderful nanny who watched us after schools. And she called my mother at work because it was serious. It was an injury and it needed medical attention. So my mother had to leave work early and come home. And I was terrified. I knew what was coming. She was so angry with me that I had broken my arm. She literally took my arm. I've never forgotten it. It was the left. And she did this with it. Oh, you broke your arm, huh? You had to do that, huh? She was so angry. So I got hauled over to the clinic. I got the arm set, put in a cast. I was not permitted any pain medication because I was being punished. I wasn't even allowed an aspirin. Nothing. That was just one example of the kind of brutality my sister and I were subjected to. One time, my sister had done something just mildly naughty. Kids do stuff. Kids are kids. And when our nanny told my mom about it after she arrived home from work, my mother, her face went from being pleasant for the benefit of the nanny to an enraged scowl. Her eyes went black. And she looked at my sister and she went, "She did what?" And she threw her on the floor in a rage and started kicking her while wearing 4-inch high heel spikes from her work attire. It probably injured my sister pretty badly. We had a history of such incidents, my sister and I. Under that deluge of abuse, more came in. One night in my teens, I awakened in my bedroom to find that my mom, who had the boyfriend of the month, he was in my room. His breath reeked of alcohol, and he was caressing me up and down my back. And I remember how terrified I was, and I found a way to just jump out of the bed and run into the bathroom and close it, because I was so afraid of what he was going to do to me. And I never told my mother because she wouldn't have wanted to hear it anyway. That ever happened to you? So if you've been molested, if you've been abused, if you've been hated and loathed or never were good enough, never measured up, I understand. I have walked in your shoes. The abuse has continued. When I was 18, the worst event hit. Amazing, but out of that whole pile of mud, this one was the worst. When I was 18, my mother beat me. She'd just gone into a rage. Something triggered her, and she went into a rage. Now, I was taller than my mother. I had her beat by about 4 inches because I'm 5'9", and I was strong. But it would never have occurred to me in a million years to even defend myself, let alone to push her away from me. If she was going to beat me, she was going to beat me. And this was before the years when people became sensitive to the fact that child abuse exists. The beating was so bad and went on for so long. I do remember at one point being on the bathroom floor as my mother was continuing to hit me. We seemed to move from room to room during this beating episode. Living room and then on the bed, and she was sitting on me and pounding me. And finally, I'm on the bathroom floor. And I know I had blood coming out of my nose, one ear, my mouth, my lip was split. And a calmness came over me. And those of you who've been traumatized, you know what that feels like when things are just so surreal, so horrible. It's like your mind leaves your body and goes to a corner of the room and looks down. Wow, look at what's happening. And you don't feel like it's you anymore. You feel like you're watching a rather bad movie. But I do remember going into that detached, calm place and looking up at her very quietly saying, "I'm going to die, aren't I? You're going to kill me." I think I smiled. That got her scared. So she got my sister to come, and the two of them hauled me into a car and took me to the emergency room. When we got into the emergency room and they had to help carry me in, I couldn't really walk. I had a lot of abdominal injuries and facial abrasions. I was a mess, and I was in shock. That's what trauma does to you, isn't it? I remember I couldn't talk. That was the most important thing that I took away from all of those years of abuse. That when I was being abused, that when I was being molested, that when anything bad came, I didn't talk. That's the cry of those of us who are abused. Our voice is taken away from us. And I remember laying on the gurney in that emergency room, and my mother is standing there, and she's telling the doctor in a very gracious way, but so concerned, "I don't know what happened to her. She just went crazy. I think she's on drugs." By the way, the strongest drug I ever took was one of those bear baby aspirin, okay? I didn't do drugs. I was afraid of them. But there she was, telling him that I had assaulted, I had attacked her, and she had had to defend herself. And that's why I had some injuries. There wasn't a mark on my mother. And the young doctor, I remember his face to this day. He got my mother to leave the room. How he got her out of there, I don't know. She did not want to leave because, they don't want anybody finding out what they've done to you. No abuser does. Remember that secrecy and silence and preserving that false image are the most important thing to your abuser, whether it's your husband, your boyfriend, a parent, even an adult child. They want you to just zip it and not let the world know what they've done to you. So the doctor got rid of my mom from the room, and then he looked at me very compassionately. And the compassion in his eyes made me cry because nobody had looked at me with any kindness or caring in years and years. I don't even remember the last time. And then he asked me, "Eileen, do you want to tell me what really happened?" And I couldn't speak. I could not speak. In future episodes, I will share with you more of where my story took me. Everything from my mother getting a 33-year-old businessman to date her 16-year-old daughter, and he then proceeded to take me to motels and strip clubs. And that's when I started smoking and drinking a lot. There's a whole story there. And I'm not sharing it because I want to shock anybody. I'm sharing this because you need to know that there's someone who may have experienced what you yourself are dealing with even right now, or it could have happened years ago. And this is why I have become a minister after Jesus got a hold of me in my 30s and began healing me from all those years of damage. He taught me and enabled me to be able to love for the first time. He taught me how to forgive. And then he put in my heart this mission. Here's my mission. I want people to know they matter and that your stories are important. But the greatest piece of news is we can overcome anything, and God can take it and turn it to good, to great good. If you love him, he's going to get a silver lining out of that dark cloud that you've survived. So, again, I am Eileen Floyd. That's part of my story. That's why I'm here for you, because you matter.